Hey, so I wanted to add a little message at the beginning of this video here because TikTok has since been restored. I recorded the clips that are following last night, about an hour after TikTok went black. So I just want to reiterate a couple of things. One of those being that we still really need to be cautious. That Neptune conjunct the North Node, which you'll hear more about in a minute, really makes me leery. So still use caution. I would continue to work on backup accounts, and I would continue to read all the fine print and details on everything. Another thing, I mentioned Juno having an opposition to Uranus, partile opposition. Okay, and that was in the 3rd and 9th house. It's concerning, but it's definitely playing out. We've seen already that apparently there's going to be a 50% type ownership here in the US for TikTok. I don't know what that means, but apparently President-elect Trump has stated that there will be a 50% ownership. So however that plays out and however that looks, I think that's what we're seeing here. So many more thoughts. Alexander of Aquarian Mythos and I will probably jump on live later today, most likely on TT, so that we can talk about more thoughts. He and I both have just racing minds at the moment. So if you'd like to join us for that and share your thoughts and hear what else we have to say, we would love to have you. And definitely hang out with us here on YouTube as well, because we're going to keep these platforms going, and we're going to start working on posting more of our long form content here more regularly. Probably also do some lives. So make sure you ring the notification bell so you don't miss what we do on this side as well. All right, y'all, have a good day and stay wise. So just over an hour ago, the inevitable TikTok blackout occurred. Aquarian Mythos, Alexander, my husband, and I were on TikTok live when it went dark. And when the notification came up on my screen, I screenshotted it so that I'd have the time. A few minutes later, I pulled the chart, and it makes so much sense, guys. I'm gonna flip my camera around and show you guys what I'm seeing. Okay. So for me, this occurred at 9:31 p.m. Central Standard Time. And as you can see, Virgo was the rising sign on the eastern horizon when TikTok went black. You can see that the ascendant is at 19 degrees of Virgo. The south node and the moon are at 29 degrees of Virgo. Now in mundane astrology, which is the astrology of world events, the south node being with the moon would indicate the people having to let go of something that is near and dear to them, and something that is like that they're already good at, something that is from their past, something that they have built. Now in mundane astrology, the moon itself rules the people. So the fact that we have the south node conjunct the moon, as you can see, at the same degree, that's these two here. What looks like a pair of headphones upside down, that's the south node, moon, pretty obvious. So what this chart is showing is that, well, for one, the government uses astrology. Large corporations use astrology. We know this already. Any of us that are in the astrological world, we see that every event that occurs that is big is always chosen and picked by excellent astrologers. Unfortunately, this is yet another event that is not to our benefit as the people. Now, in looking at this chart, the very next thing that I see after checking out the first house is actually across the chart in the 7th house. So the first house in astrology rules you, or the person that is asking a question. If we're talking about horary astrology in a natal chart, it's you. So when we look across the seventh house, that is the other person, partnerships, anyone else in the world. It can also signify public enemies, things of that nature. Well, in looking at this seventh house, we have the North Node at 29 degrees and Neptune at 27 degrees, and they're conjunct. Okay, so with this combination, here's the crazy thing. All right, Neptune, it makes everything foggy. It rules deception, not quite in the same way as Mercury. Mercury is more like a trickster. Neptune is more of like narcissistic deception. I'm sorry, the bed's rocking. My husband won't hold still. The North Node, it's the opposite of the South Node, okay? So the South Node is something we're supposed to let go of, release, and something that we're good at, something we want to hang on to, our comfort zone. The North Node is the direction we are meant to go in life, but it's not comfortable. It's not what we want. It's usually met with a lot of resistance, and typically we resist with everything in us because we don't always want what's good for us. We want comfort. So the fact that we have the North Node conjunct Neptune there, the North Node also tends to magnify things in the same way that Jupiter does. It makes everything bigger that it touches. So it's like mass deception going on, okay? Neptune, being placed in the sign of Pisces right now, is in a very strong location as well. It's in rulership. So the fact that the North Node is sitting there with Neptune, it's like the deception is at its peak. It's being magnified and amplified, and it's as strong as it can get. So all very interesting things. Also, Pisces has a lot of isolation with it. As a sign, Pisces tends to rule things like mental institutions and hospitals and monasteries, places of isolation where we can have big spiritual growth, but it's usually through challenging means. And then also the 12th house naturally, which Pisces is the sign of in the natural chart, also rules mental health. So we've got the North Node amplifying all these topics, and it's not particularly going to say, oh, here, I'll make it all better. It's just going to amplify and magnify whatever is there. Now, the next thing I want to point out, still in the 7th house, that little green symbol there, that is the symbol for Venus. And the purple symbol there is the symbol for Saturn. They are only 5 minutes apart in the sky. Okay, they're sitting together essentially. So Saturn restricts things in the way that Jupiter magnifies. He's doing the opposite. He's restricting. Venus, it rules our money, our self-worth, our value system, and our food. Now, it rules other things, but those are our most basic, most important things that it rules. Now, in this particular chart, it's also the planet that rules the 2nd house, which rules those things. Venus rules the sign of Libra, which is on the 2nd house cusp here. So the 1st house is actually ruled by Mercury, which is over in the sign of Capricorn at the moment. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the 2nd house is ruled by Venus, which is, and Saturn actually. It might be, I'd need to look at the cusps in Placidus, but there may be an almutin of Saturn for this chart, which is just ironic to me. So Saturn is going to restrict all those things I just mentioned. Also, another thing to look at in this chart is what else Venus rules, and that is the 9th house. You know what the 9th house is? It's a lot of big topics right now. It's spirituality. It's higher education. It's things like spiritual gurus and teachers. And the biggest one that I can think of right now is it rules over people of foreign lands, people from other areas. So Yeah, Saturn's going to be restricting all those things. Also, good to point out is with the ascendant at 19 degrees of Virgo and with Venus and Saturn at 16 degrees of Pisces, that's a pretty decently strong opposition going on right there between the ascendant of this chart and those rulers. Another thing to note is Saturn in this chart rules the 5th house and the 6th house. See, here is Capricorn. Saturn rules Capricorn and the 5th house in this chart, and it rules the sign of Aquarius and the 6th house in traditional astrology. So we're going to see again another big theme with 5th house topics, which are things like creativity and passion. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've heard of a lot of creative people in the last couple of days that are very stirred up about the loss of their businesses. 5th house also rules children and sports and activities that are childlike, so things that are going to get you up and get you moving. And then the 6th house also rules our daily routines. Virgo in the natural chart, the sign that we talked about at the beginning, rules the 6th house in the natural chart. So that's going to have similar themes to the sign of Virgo. This is your workplace. This is your daily routine, your habits, the things that make up your day. It's also going to rule your pets, small pets, and things like that. So putting all of those specific things together, we're looking at a lot of losses and frustrations with this opposition between the planets that we're talking about. I've got one more thing to add, well, more than one more thing, but I've got a couple more things I want to add in here in a second. But just with those things alone is creating this oppositional energy that's going to make it very hard to overcome. There's going to be a lot of people that feel hopeless right now. Also, good to point out is with the ascendant at 19 degrees of Virgo and with Venus and Saturn at 16 degrees of Pisces, that's a pretty decently strong opposition going on right there between the ascendant of this chart and those rulers. Another thing to note is Saturn in this chart rules the 5th house and the 6th house. See, here is Capricorn. Saturn rules Capricorn and the 5th house in this chart, and it rules the sign of Aquarius and the 6th house in traditional astrology. So we're going to see again another big theme with 5th house topics, which are things like creativity and passion. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've heard of a lot of creative people in the last couple of days that are very stirred up about the loss of their businesses. 5th house also rules children and sports and activities that are childlike, so things that are going to get you up and get you moving. And then the 6th house also rules our daily routines. Virgo in the natural chart, the sign that we talked about at the beginning, rules the 6th house in the natural chart. So that's going to have similar themes to the sign of Virgo. This is your workplace. This is your daily routine, your habits, the things that make up your day. It's also going to rule your pets, small pets, and things like that. So putting all of those specific things together, we're looking at a lot of losses and frustrations with this opposition between the planets that we're talking about. I've got one more thing to add, well, more than one more thing, but I've got a couple more things I want to add in here in a second. But just with those things alone is creating this oppositional energy that's going to make it very hard to overcome. There's going to be a lot of people that feel hopeless right now. And that brings me back to here. Okay, so like I said, in mundane astrology, the moon rules the people, but in this chart, the moon rules the 11th house because it rules the sign of Cancer, which is the 11th house in this chart. The 11th house is community including online communities. It's our salaries, it's our hopes and dreams, it's our friend groups in the greater sense. So, yeah, all of this lines up so perfectly. This had to be by design. Then you've got Mars, who is retrograding right now in the sign of Cancer. And Mars is the god of what now? Aries. And Aries rules what? So we've got Mars coming into the 11th house with destructive, forceful energy, cleaning house in a warrior sort of way. So what does Mars rule in the chart? It rules the third house of communication and our technology devices like our cars and our cell phones we use and computers and all of that. That's here. And it also rules the 8th house, Aries, in this chart, which is the house of shared resources, how we make money together. The 8th house also rules over things like debts and bank loans, taxes, all that fun stuff. Now, in this chart, Mars is making a trine with Neptune and the North Node, and a sextile to the South Node and the Moon. So again, these energies are working together, not exactly for our good, because it's all about who has the knowledge to utilize the energies. So at this point in time, we can take this information and we can use it for our benefit. But this was definitely chosen by someone with esoteric and astrological training who knew how to pick the right time to make the screens go black. Another thing I'm going to point out in this chart here is that Juno and Uranus are making a immediate direct opposition to each other. It's partile, which means it's on the same degree. It's a few minutes apart, about maybe 25, 26 minutes apart, something like that. Hard to see through the phone, but it's a very strong opposition. And Juno rules contracts and Uranus rules sudden things. So sudden loss of contract right there. Now, it's my understanding that different people got shut down at slightly different times. So like I said at the beginning of this video, this is the time that I got the notification on my phone. But even if it changed, just a few minutes, it's still going to have very similar qualities to the energy. The thing that is going to change the most is the ascendant, and then the moon did move into the sign of Libra just a few minutes later. So generally speaking, though, this chart is going to be pretty accurate across the board for when it went black, just based on the fact that most of us experienced that blackout within a few minutes of each other. You can expect new terms and conditions when the app comes back. Like, looking at this chart, we're going to have to agree to some whole new set of terms and conditions. I can almost guarantee it. So Alexander of Aquarian Mythos, my husband, was just pointing out that we've also got this going on down here. So there's Mercury, which is what rules the whole chart in this particular case. And it also rules the 10th house of career. So it's ruling the first house, which is Virgo, and it's ruling the 10th house of career in this chart. And it's sitting with part of fortune in Capricorn. And with that little one there, Pallas Athena, it's got the little diamond shape and the cross underneath. That is an asteroid, and she rules over things like strategy, almost like, a chess plan, a battle plan kind of energy. So there may be some hope for us here if we can kind of strategize how we're going to handle our next steps, especially for those of us that used TikTok to enhance our career in one way or another. And if we, consider the fact that Mercury already rules things like communication and social media and all of these things, maybe this will bring us some luck. Maybe this will bring us some good. But we've definitely still got, because, the moon is trine to the sun in this chart, which is not bad, except that we have Mars opposing that Sun still. They're 4 degrees away from each other, but that's still a pretty tight orb when you're talking the Sun being involved. So it's going to take some work. It's going to take some strategy. We're going to have to give something up, you guys. Like they're forcing us to give something up. It might be TikTok, or it might be something about ourselves. And I don't know about you, but I'm not particularly okay with just assuming that giving up something about myself, because that's in the first house. I'm not sure that's something I'm just going to immediately agree to. So keep these astrological things in mind. I personally would not sign or click agree to anything, not just TikTok, but to anything without fully reading the details. Not right now. Not with the way things are in the sky, especially with what we were talking about earlier with the North Node and Neptune being together. Deception is rampant. Don't believe anything right now. I'm not saying that you can't step back and be calm about it all. I'm just saying, don't just trust things at face value. Nothing is as it seems right now. So I could go on for a lot longer. One last thing Alexander also pointed out was the fact that we have, Pluto sitting here at the beginning of Aquarius still, and that's the 6th house in this chart. So if we're willing to transform, if we're willing to let go of some stuff, and if we're willing to do a balancing act and potentially use creative means to strategize and hopefully come up with a so-called battle plan to create a new opportunity for ourselves, I think we can have a positive outcome from this for our careers, for our daily life and all of that, but expect it to hurt. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna take work. And whenever there's oppositions, it's like sitting across the table playing a game of chess. It's a battle, and it's every man for himself. So keep all of those things in mind. And remember that the best thing we can do right now is be united and care for each other and support each other, regardless of outcomes.